Welcome back to another episode of Ballroom Chat, the podcast dedicated to sharing the dance journey. I'm your host, Samantha with Love.Live.Dance. Today, I'm joined by Chris Johnston. He is the co-owner and founder of SuperShag Dance Studios and SuperShag Video Production. He's also a world-class adjudicator and the co-organizer for both the Caribbean Dancesport Classic and DBDC in Boston. He's a host for several different video programs as part of Dance Beat magazine, including Approach the Bar, Cheeky Chat, and Comp Crawl. So please enjoy my conversation with Chris Johnston. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for being a guest on today's episode.
My pleasure.
And I guess for those that are tuning in on YouTube, we'll say cheers as well. You are one of the few evening guests that I've had because of the time difference with the East Coast and Mountain time zones. So we can be a little bit more relaxed tonight, which is always fun.
Okay.
I imagine that there are not many people that are listening to my podcast that don't already know who you are, but just in case, how did you get into ballroom dancing and how did the start of your dance journey begin?
So I started dancing when I was 10 in Northern Ireland. And I, as most 10-year-olds in Northern Ireland, play soccer or football. But for our American audience, we will say soccer. I had absolutely no interest in dancing, but my younger brother and sister, who are twins and are 4 years younger than I am, they started dancing. And then they started with group classes, and then they started doing private lessons. And we lived 25 miles south of Belfast. So I was only 10, and I was sort of dragged along with them. So one of the guys who I played football with at school, his sister started, and he actually came to my front door one night and said, all right, she needs to dance with somebody. You're already there. Dance with her. And I wasn't really too happy about that. Anyhow, I started dancing. I was absolutely useless. My little brother, who was 6, always beat me. So I don't know why I stayed, but that was the start of the journey.
So what did end up keeping you in then? What was that motivating factor to continue through with it?
There were a lot of girls.
Fair enough.
Seemed good enough.
That is an answer that we get a lot from the gentleman, which is, at least it's truthful. If that's the motivation to get people in the door and to keep them around, we'll take it. But obviously at some point then it changes from an amateur career and kind of competition and training to an actual career, professional pro-am. You go on to open your own studio and obviously the production company. So what was kind of the journey that made you decide that this was a career path that you wanted to continue with?
Well, basically what happened, I was totally useless at it at the beginning. And then when I was 13, I switched partners and basically never lost another competition in Ireland. So we won the junior championships 3 times. We were in the final of Blackpool Junior. And then we won the open amateur when we were 16 as well. So there was a coach from England who had spoken to my parents, a lady called Margaret Redmond. And she had said that when the time was right, she would like me to come over and train with her in Liverpool. And I actually lived with her and her husband for 12 years. So anyhow, I'm now in Liverpool. I'm living with Margaret and her husband, and I danced with a young girl called Nicola Cranshaw, who is now better known as Nikki Nordine or Nicola Nordine. So we were in the Blackpool final, international final, UK final, European finalists. We won the US Open. Did pretty well. So as amateurs, and then we split up. Oh, actually, the interesting thing, about 2 weeks ago, there is somebody who's putting dance videos up on YouTube at the moment, old ones, and he had reached 1989. That was the last year I danced with Nikki. So we're like third in the United Kingdom, and then some German cop. So it was that was fun to see, very nostalgic. But anyhow, I ended up going and dancing in Finland for a year and a half with a lady called Helena Ahti. Now, Helena is the Len Goodman of Dancing with the Stars in Finland.
Okay.
And in fact, she is a huge star in Finland, and always has been. When I first danced with her, every major newspaper and magazine did an interview with us, simply because she was just the most famous dancer. Even though she wasn't the one that won everything, she was absolutely gorgeous person, gorgeous looking. And I danced with her for a year and a half. She then decided to marry her boyfriend, and I'm stuck because I'm 28. I've left school when I was 17. That's a whole other story. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I got a chance to come and work for Fred Astaire's in Boston.
Okay.
So that's how I got to be over here.
Gotcha. And I had listened to an interview that you did with Michael Johnston for the online Ballroom Congress a couple of years ago. And you had mentioned at the time that you really appreciated that franchises like Fred Astaire and Arthur Murray had kind of created this pathway to make teaching ballroom dance and competing in ballroom dance a viable career. What about those systems, or what about that idea for you was so impactful to kind of decide that this really is a decent way to make a living and has a longevity to it, that maybe other studios weren't creating an opportunity for?
Well, so the first thing was, in Europe, it's very different because it isn't really, it's much more like a mom and pop business. It's like a, small corner store. So there really is no business. The customers don't really matter. It's all about the teacher. Customer service doesn't exist unless Margaret Redmond's involved, and that it's totally through the roof. But just coming to here and be put in an environment where there was an actual business structure was like, wow, that's and being told that I had to call and confirm all my lessons the night before. And I'm like, what do you mean? Why do I have to confirm them? They've booked them. So it was very nice to be told, well, you're just the same as having a massage or, having a haircut. You are just a commodity. You're no big star. So that was a bit of a knockdown. But the problem is, outside Fred Astaire's and Arthur Murray's, there still is not a career path for kids. So it's really tough when you look at how many really good young American kids, they get to 18, 19, and it's like, guess what? I'm going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And they get out of ballroom dancing. So.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you bring that up, because that was a point of conversation that we had with Christine Barr-Noel, kind of in the similar vein that, the traditional career options for competitive dancers in the US, we kind of see as either you can teach until you drop, you can open up a studio, which comes with its own pros and cons, or you can be a coach and an adjudicator, but that can feel very limiting and restraining if you are second in the world or third in the world and you aren't competing at a point to get a national title to your name. So we kind of had the conversation of, well, you can make your own career path that is within the ballroom world, but different. I see SuperShag as kind of exactly what you did, is just created an opportunity for yourself and then built a business around it. So do you see that as a departure from kind of the traditional career, or do you see that as it was completely part and parcel with being a ballroom dancer and it just happened to take on a life of its own?
Okay, so the first thing, once again, go back to Fred Astaire's.
Yeah.
Even though I left the organization, without that first little bit of structure, I would not have had a clue what I was doing. However, when I was dancing and actually doing extremely well, I really was more interested in the parties and the music. So I had a great education about playing music and running parties at different competitions in Europe. So when I came over here, I actually discovered that it wasn't the dancing, it was the parties. So SuperShag actually started as a company that ran parties. That's why it's actually called SuperShag, SuperShag Productions and Dance Studios, because we hosted events. And of course, then, our students, they had this great social life. And I also saw that because of Fred Astaire's. Like, I obviously danced in Blackpool quite a lot. And to be honest, we used to laugh at the Americans coming over on these trips with their students. It's like, that's a real fantasy world. And now I go back to Blackpool and I go, oh, no. This is the real world. You're actually the fantasy world. Because once again, you've got all these great kids in Europe, and what's in their future? If you look at it nowadays, how many ex-world professional champions are now dancing pro-am? So that is not a sad reflection on the art. That is a really sad reflection on the sport, because the sport does not support the sports people.
Yeah.
So
is that
it's
do you think that is a result of kind of splitting the idea of ballroom dancing into two camps, where you have this competitive athletic sport nature and then you have the business of ballroom dance, and very rarely do we talk about the in between? Or do you think it's a marketing issue where we're not encouraging former world champions to dip their toe into the pro-am world because it's not seen as competing on the same level as when they were competing for their titles?
You don't have to encourage them anymore. They're doing it. Because, I'm sorry, but the thing that drives ballroom dancing are the pro-ams. And honestly, they don't give a about who the world champion is. It's like they, obviously they'll be very nice to you if you're the world champion, but nobody knows who these world champions are.
Yeah.
And there just is no interest. Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's like, that's really bad pro-am.
Yes.
Really bad pro-am. But that's the only thing that people are interested in.
Well, and it's flashy,
They're not
and
interested in who the world.
Yeah, it's that reality TV, right? You want to see the fancy dresses, you want to see the flashy moves and lifts and tricks, and you want to hear about the drama behind the scenes. It's not thinking about years and years of doing the rumba basic in front of a a coach that, you know, is berating you the entire time. That's not the experience that pro-am dancers want to think about or experience for themselves. We want that kind of Cinderella, Prince Charming veneer on everything.
Well, that's not real life. There you go.
Yeah. Well, so talk to me a little bit about your mindset or your experience of kind of selling this idea of ballroom as a fantasy or ballroom as a party atmosphere to pro-am students. What hurdles did you run into? What successes did you find? What was kind of your experience through that process of selling ballroom as a business?
Well, there's a whole lot of different aspects. You really, the one thing that may be aimed at some studios is that they do sell it as a business to their pro-am students, and they don't want to know it's a business.
Yeah.
They want to think it just happens. Like I got a real shock the first time I went to a chiropractor's, and I thought this was this really holistic experience, but all they did was try to sell me 10 sessions. I'm like,
Yeah.
not interested, you know? So there's different ways. It's the hard thing is selling it to the real world. Once the students are there, it's like, obviously you create a social life for them. And if it's real as well. So what SuperShag was, it took the best parts of Fred Astaire's, but then added a real life element to it, because we started to run parties in bars and clubs. So it wasn't just the studio party, because Fred Astaire's and Arthur Murray's did an unbelievable job of creating this very safe atmosphere where you could go out and dance. But that's not real life. So when we started to run the parties in real venues, not in our studio, that now it wasn't just going to the studio for the night. Mm-hmm. Even though both of our SuperShag studios look like nightclubs. So, and we're lucky that we're in areas where there are a lot of restaurants and bars, so people actually can come and they can go to a restaurant or go to a bar, come to the studio, then go back to a bar again afterwards. Yeah. So it's just a lifestyle thing. And if you think about it, being in the dance world, you just think that everybody parties up. Sorry, nowadays the kids don't party at all. They don't do anything apart from dance. But when I was growing up, the partying was pretty major thing to do. And then to come here and just, the type of people that you mix with, they're very serious, but they want to have fun.
Yeah.
But maybe they don't necessarily know how to do it without getting arrested. So they can come to SuperShag and they won't get arrested.
There you go.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well,
but selling it, as I say, selling it to, like, going to a restaurant, a bar, and telling them, well, we're going to run a ballroom dancing night. They look at you as if you're stupid. Dancing with the Stars has helped, because now it's a little bit more in everybody's awareness. But in the old days, it was like, because like everything else, well, what numbers can you bring us? How many people can you bring us? So that was a bit difficult. But then when they saw the setup that we brought in, it was just like any other DJ coming in. Only we went a little bit more, because we brought, lights, screens. And this was like back in the 90s when people were doing that thing. We play videos on windows, on walls, whatever. So it was great. It was just like having a big party all the time.
Yeah, well, and I think that's so important too, to make it connect to people's lived experience, right? I feel like there's this misconception that ballroom is very, and it can be very prim and proper and very old school and very classic, but that's not the music that we're currently listening to on the radio. So I feel like bringing in a generation of couples and social dance students, we have to kind of bridge the gap to say, okay, no, if you go out to your local country western bar and you hear Thomas Rhett on, well, congratulations, you're doing a nightclub two-step or an international rumba. Here are the basics. Here, let's go. Or if Justin Bieber or Ed Sheeran are on the radio, well, maybe it's a salsa this time, so let's teach you a basic salsa. I think it's very unique, like you said, that you partnered with restaurants and bars and that you kind of have this nightclub atmosphere to make it feel like the type of venue that people are going to go out and actually dance with their partner for fun. It makes it really connect to their actual lived experience in their life.
Yeah. So the other thing was that I always had a huge interest in music. So I've got a nice story about Bulgaria. That's the Bulgaria. I think it was 1989, beginning of 89 maybe, or 88. And at that point, I was doing Latin and ballroom, but I always hated ballroom dancing because it was like, ugh, to think I had to put on tail suits and yet I wore tuxedos all the time. Not this year, but last year, 2019, I was never out of a tuxedo. But anyhow, on the way flying out to Bulgaria, Michael Jackson just brought out the Bad album.
Okay.
And it was huge in Britain. I can remember watching MTV they did the Bad video. And they brought that out the night before you could get hold of the stuff. So I was at Heathrow Airport, rushed in, got the cassette, because I had my little Sony Walkman at that time and everything. So we get to Bulgaria and we danced the Latin, that we won the Latin. That's cool. And then we're supposed to dance ballroom the next night. So I went to the organizer and I said, can I just do a show? And he goes, no, you're dancing the club. I said, but I really think you should let me do a show. And he said, look, this is all being televised. I said, oh, then you definitely want me to do a show. So we went and got the producer, or he took me to the producer. So he had the old cassette players and everything. So I just said, okay, boom. I said, can you play this? They play Bad.
Mm.
Then they played, I think, I Can't Stop Loving You or something. I said, okay, how about I let you borrow my cassette tomorrow night and I'll do two dances. Instead of dancing the cup, we'll do a show. And this producer nearly cut my arm off because Jackson had actually done a concert in West Berlin. And that sort of was one of the things that started the wall coming down. So the kids were actually trying to get Michael Jackson music, and they could, obviously at that time, they couldn't get it. So it was about 18,000 people at this event. And we did the show. And it was just like, as soon as the first thing for Bad came on, it's just like the audience just erupted. I could have left at that point. I didn't have to dance or anything, but I did my two dances. So there was a guy called Reigel, and Kim was the world amateur standard champion, and he was in the final of the pro. But obviously this is 1988 or 87, so most people would have no idea who Kim Reigel was, which tells us a little bit about the state of our sport. Mm-hmm. So I said that he was a good friend of mine. I said, okay, we're going to do a double show tomorrow night. And we worked out where he could dance foxtrot while I danced rumba, and he could dance tango and I danced cha-cha. So we had to have a police escort out of that hall at the end, because the place just went crazy. And it was like, wow. So this is the power of music. So this is leading on to coming over here, because when I started working at Fred Astaire's, one of the things I didn't quite agree with was that they had a cassette that played, and it played, 20 songs all day, every day. And maybe at the party, they changed it. So I wasn't too happy about that. So I changed the whole music thing. And when we went to these restaurants and bars, we only danced to popular music. Blackpool was not allowed.
Yeah.
So there was no Hugo Strasser or any of the whatever they were dancing to at that time. It was all popular music. So that's what made it a bit easier as well, because people would actually come just to listen to the music as well.
Yeah, and if you get people sitting at the bar that are listening to the music and enjoying it, and they see a couple that's dancing, they go, "Oh, that looks like fun." Well, there you have a great opportunity to make a new customer out of it, out of the whole experience.
Well, I just had another interesting experience very recently, because the old Ritz Hotel in Boston, back in the day, back in the 90s, they had this fantastic, I don't know what you would call it, this glass structure on the roof.
Okay.
And they had music, they had jazz and a little dance floor. And the restaurant was not the main Ritz restaurant, but people would get dressed up. And it was a destination, because even if you couldn't dance, there were people who went that could dance. So anyhow, the Ritz became the Taj. I never was in the Taj, and now it is being reopened. They've spent $140 million renovating it. And I was able to go and see the new Ritz. So, of course, I want to see what's up on the roof, because they put a nice marble floor in. And I spoke to her, I said, did you ever think that maybe one of the draws that would get people here is the fact that they can sit all around here, and there are people who will be up doing something, so you can drink and you can be entertained. If they're good, you're entertained. If they're really awful, you're entertained. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So I said, you've missed a hell of an opportunity there. And just everything that they've done, it's beautiful. But there is nothing, not one of their rooms is set up that you really could put a nice dance floor in and do something. So.
Well, that's baffling too, because you would think that at least somewhere they would be thinking about renting it out to weddings or events, or creating an opportunity for a rental market in some way, shape, or form. And you would want a dance floor, or at least the ability to put a dance floor down in those scenarios.
They will get dance floors in, but It's like they didn't consult any party planners. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because they could have done a lot more that would have made it very, easy. I looked at it, it was like, I won't be coming back here. Nice hotel though.
Right.
So.
Thinking about kind of this idea of dancing to bad and the interplay between music and the dance, it leads me to also think about the constant struggle between moving the sport forward while also recognizing, acknowledging, and respecting the history. You mentioned there was a dancer who, to your point, name has already escaped my brain, who is not in our collective consciousness at this point. So where do you kind of find the balance point between wanting to keep with modern music, wanting to progress the dance forward as we as a society move forward, but also still acknowledge and respect the history and kind of where we came from?
Did I pay you to ask me that question?
Not yet.
So when we were just chatting a little bit earlier, I told you about our event in Boston.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting event because it was actually started by a couple who I taught for their wedding, who were in basically, the guys has a production company, and his wife at the time, she was in party planning, or a little bit more than that, but party planning, conventions, that sort of thing. So they approached me and said, why do we do this comp? Because one day, it was when the one day comp started. Said, well, we don't know anything about it, but we can run events. So it would be perfect to marry it with you. I was like, that's great. So one of the things that they said was like, okay, how do we find out anything about the history of dancing? And I'm like, with great difficulty.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that SuperShag also did, apart from running the parties, is that we started taking, at the very beginning, taking light-up photographs, because you couldn't find out what happened at a competition until Dance Beat came out at the end of the month.
Mm.
And I'm like, so even as a kid, I had a subscription to Dance News, which is the British version of Dance Beat. And once a month, it would come and you would find out what had happened at the different comps. So I think we were the first people to start putting results online, but we did it with a photograph so that people could actually see who they were. And then from there, we moved into videos. So like when SuperShag go to a comp and we're running the party for them, we're also videoing every major finalist. Now, when I say major finalist, that'll be the top amateurs, it'll be the professionals, and every pro-am scholarship. Because the pro-ams don't get an awful lot of recognition.
Right.
But they will see a 25-second video. If they're in a final of a scholarship, they will see the video. So these guys who approached me said, like, you're actually doing something about the history. I'm like, yeah. I said, but that's just because I want to know. It was purely selfish. I want to know what the results were. So they said, well, okay, are there lifetime achievement awards? And I said, yeah, there are. I said, what happens is that in the middle of the comp, it stopped for 10 minutes. There may be a 5-minute video. Somebody walks out, they give it a trophy, they walk off.
Yeah.
And the people who matter, the pro-abs, have no idea what that is.
Nope.
So they said, all right, our Lifetime Achievement Award is going to be a dinner. So Frank, he, as I say, he has his own production company. He works for some very big clients like CVS, Hancock. So he knows what he's doing. So he will fly to different competitions. Once we pick the person we're going to honor, we do actually ask them, who give us 10 people that we should talk to about you. So they get the choice, just make sure that they haven't fallen out with anybody. So, well, dancing's dancing. So Frank goes, he interviews them and then puts together this like 15 to 25-minute video, which goes back and tells you about this person's life. And he said that was very, very important, because without history, you can't move forward. Because you don't know where you've come from. And there's, like, once again, if you look at soccer is, especially soccer from Britain, because they have got it so well. All the time they're showing old games, they're talking to old players just to keep, and some of these old players now who didn't make that much money when they were playing in like the 60s and early 70s, they're now on the TV all the time, so it's, we need history. So
Yeah, well, and to your point, I like the fact that you mentioned, you can't move forward unless you know where you've come from. I feel like we run the risk of trying to reinvent the wheel without understanding why it failed or succeeded in the past. We constantly try to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, but not understanding why we're getting the same one. Do you see an area of our industry where it would have been nice 10, 15, 20 years ago to start recording either the process or the winners or something about customer management or the pro-am experience that we've now lost out on the potential ability to move forward because we don't have that past history?
well, I could talk about all of those things that you've just mentioned, but not necessarily to do with history. But I just think it's really bad for the kids that come through. Like, okay, I am a soccer fanatic, so I can talk about who was playing for Chelsea in 1974. Okay, there's just this thing, and the kids don't even know who the world champion was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And they don't care. That's the other thing. It's like they don't seem to care.
Yeah.
And the pro-ams care about themselves. So it doesn't matter. It's just,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
It's I don't know.
To your point, the youth competitors or amateur competitors don't necessarily know the names of the top professionals from 2 years or 3 years or 4 years ago, but they're all watching their YouTube videos, copying their routines. So they know what the winner looked like, but they don't necessarily know the name or the history associated with that person.
Yeah, like, but once again, it's you should be able to go back 30 years. Okay,
Yeah.
like look at golf. Look at golf. Like we're still talking about Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
It's Ben Hogan. It's like it's we just do not have that grasp to take it to a bigger audience. And then obviously the way the comps are set up, they're not set up in a viewer-friendly way.
Right.
But that's a whole other story. That is a whole other story.
But it's an important one to talk about, or at least briefly touch on. You're right. I think if you look at something like football, or if you look at something like golf or baseball, it's easy to track the history because you only have so many events throughout the course of the year, and we know which ones are the professional level events and which one are the minor leagues and then which one are the local sports teams. So it's a little bit easier to become a fan of the sport and follow the sport and the progress. I feel like ballroom dance, we're running into a potential cascade point where we have 5 events in the US on any given weekend, plus the UK events, plus the European events, plus the Japanese events. They're, constantly going on. So it's harder to track who's at what event, which ones matter, which ones are for fun, and who is moving up or down the leaderboard as a result.
Well, it's really easy. You either look at Dancesport or go to the SuperShag site and you see which events really matter. And by the way, I should have said, obviously, our other partner in our Cup in Boston is Didio Barrera, co-owner of Dancesport. So he, once again, like this was sort of a marriage made in heaven, because he was like, yeah, we need history. So like even Dancesport now is not doing as much as nobody could do anything last year, but it's not doing as much as they used to be. But Dancesport was the only other place that you could really, find out. But then once again, if you look at SuperShag and you look at Dancesport, we could only do what we were doing because we were also doing other stuff when we went to events. So there are some well-intended amateurs who can write really well and do it, but at the end of the day, if you cannot make money doing something, then it's not going to happen. So organizers don't want to pay to have a reporter there talking about their event. So it's a huge problem how we move past that. And you just mentioned, like all the events everywhere, all over the place. Well, I tell you what, if there's 5 competitions in the US, in Europe, there'll be about 10,000 football games. So it's, and people will know because of the history, and it means something to them. So I need another drink, I think.
Hey, it's me again, jumping into the midpoint of today's episode to remind you about BallroomBox. I've mentioned in past episodes that we partner with BallroomBox to help support the podcast, and their spring box was just recently sent out. It's absolutely fantastic, one of my favorites thus far. If you are not already picked up a subscription, please use the code BallroomChat at checkout to save 10% on your first box, and part of those proceeds, like I said, go towards supporting the podcast. You can find out more using the link in the description box below. I have a question, but I'm trying to figure out the best way to pose it or to answer to ask it. Which is, and I feel like it's come up in the past, where the line between sport, performance art, passion, and hobby is within the dance industry. Because you have the history of sport, you have the stylings and progress of performing arts, and then you have, at least in the US, and the growth of Pro-Am globally, this kind of passive hobby where people come in and they enjoy it, but then they go on to other things, or it becomes more of a creative pursuit, which pushes them in the art. It creates an athletic opportunity. It pushes them into the sport. So how do you kind of see the melding and blending of those 3 areas?
So within our little circle, obviously some people say it's an art, some people say it's a sport. The problem is the general public don't consider it an art, and the general public don't consider it a sport. Another example, DBDC 2019. So we had Ricardo and Yulia dancing the competition, not doing a show, actually dancing the comp, and Nino and Andra. Okay, so you've got 2 out of the top 6 in the world there. I think it was $55 to get in. Now, people would bitch and moan about $55 to get in. The same people would spend $145 or $150 to go and see Boston Ballet. Now, I don't know anything about ballet, but I don't think Boston Ballet is the Ricardo or the Nina and Andrew of what they do. Yeah. But they don't complain about that. So, as I say, we can't sell. Yeah. So we can't sell ourselves as an art, okay? Because it's just not the interest to go and watch it. Oh, it's like it's not there. Now we get on to the sport thing. I think now it is a sport because everything has been so, going to use the word regulated, but that's maybe not quite the right thing. That if we run a competition, we have to have a certain size of floor. We have to dance to certain types of music. Okay, this bump, bump, bump. So basically, they're setting down rules for everything to the point where it's like, I look at all these kids and they're unbelievable. Like they could do things that I would hurt myself dreaming about. It's, but they're all the same. There's very few of them that are different. And that's because they have to have their floor that's 40 by 60. They have to have their quick step or whatever that's whatever Betty beats. So there's no individuality. It's just like, so I think it has become a sport. But once again, the general public don't look at this as a sport. Like even, so if you look, breakdancing is in the next Olympics.
Right.
Well, WDSF, the Amateur Dance Sport Federation, hey, look where they put all their money. Breakdancing.
Yeah.
And then, but when you look at what those kids can do, if gymnastics can be an Olympic sport, then that's an Olympic sport on steroids. So, but it got knocked back. And there was a lot of ballroom dancers who were knocking it. And I'm like, guys, come on, just accept it. You're never going to have ballroom dancing in the Olympics, but let's give breakdancing a round of applause.
Yeah.
And I think the next one that may go into the Olympics is salsa dancing because there's an audience for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I guess the argument could be made that ballroom dancing is in the Olympics, but it's on ice with couples figure skating or ice dancing, since there's kind of a meshing between what we do on the ballroom floor and what they do at ice. But yeah, to your point, I would say either let's bring back the Lindy community or let's really get behind the salsa community, because those are going to be the two that I think make it as an Olympic event before the foxtrot does. And I love the foxtrot, but it's not perceived as a sport or an athletic endeavor in the same way that something like breakdancing is, or something like ice skating or figure skating is.
So now I want two comments. The first one about the Lindy community, and then the other one about bringing ballroom dancing into the Olympics. So we basically got our big break running parties at clubs because of the Lindy explosion in the 90s. Okay. We just happened to be, I was out at a Saturday night with some of our teachers at a jazz club, and we didn't like the band downstairs, and they had recorded music upstairs at a really cool bar. So we went up there, and there was a dance floor, and we started dancing. And they were playing all sort of Lindy music. Anyhow, they asked us to come and would we be interested in doing one Sunday night a month. So we ran our first one. So they asked us to come back and do every Saturday night. So that was right at the beginning of the Lindy. They asked us to run a swing night, so we ran it. The problem was that explosion had nothing to do with dancing. That was a rebellion of kids about how they could dress. Now, there is a Lindy community, but it's not accepted either. But for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months, Lindy in Boston, because all of these kids who were schlepping around in their jeans and t-shirts, come Friday and Saturday night, they put their suits on. They got dressed up, they could wear hats, but none of them could dance. None of these kids could dance. So there was a huge club called the Roxy in Boston, and we had a little Friday night event. And we actually did, there's a school called Emerson College. I think they do a lot of communications and stuff.
Yeah.
So there was a whole group from Emerson who came to our Lindy night. But once again, they came because they could dress up. And it was sort of rebelling against everything. Just like if you look at the bands, all those Lindy bands at the beginning were ska or punk bands.
Right.
So they were always rebelling against everything. Okay. But then you went to the Roxy and it was packed, and you had not the really cool people out there dancing. The really cool people were all standing in their suits. So it died. It died. So that was my first thing about the Lindy community. And I actually did, it was funny because I actually started dancing Lindy, and was second in some really big competition in New York that was televised all over the place. And Linda Wakefield said that we should have won, but the US champion was there. So, and the TV program was following him around, so he had to win. That's all good.
Yeah, that's a discussion for a different day.
Oh, that's totally a discussion for a different day. There is one style that could break through. Smooth. Because when you actually listen to the music that they're dancing to, that covers everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, once again, the outfits are a little bit bizarre. But if you had a series on TV where they actually wore outfits that suited the music they were dancing to, I think that could be really interesting. And you look, that does seem to be the growth area. And it's all about the music. It's like absolutely fantastic. But there, you know, you've got to, I think they need to change the name of Viennese waltz, because there is nothing Viennese about it anymore. And you know, it's just, it is brilliant.
Yeah. I'm a smoothie at heart.
That's my
adore the direction that smooth is going. It's funny that you kind of call out the fact that it's not Viennese. It's losing its tie to what we think of as Viennese waltz from a standard perspective. And I have to agree, I thoroughly enjoy dancing Viennese waltz as a smooth dancer. I hate watching it occasionally because it feels chaotic when you have 8 couples that are on the floor all moving incredibly quickly in completely broken hold. They're emoting and expressing, and they're doing tricks and turns, and it's like, what's going on? But it's gorgeous to dance.
Well, actually, blood and gore is good for TV. So if they are doing the Viennese waltz, and you know, and there's a bit of you know, argy bargy, as we would say, I think that could be good for viewers.
Yeah.
I would encourage that.
So if smooth is moving in a direction that we think can move with the times, that can gather interest from the public, that can kind of capture an interest in a potentially new market or in a larger market for the ballroom dance community, what can something like Latin or rhythm do to update with the times? Because I feel like standard's place is really to kind of keep that tradition, to keep that history, to kind of keep a nod to the past so we know where we came from. But rhythm and Latin, I feel like, are kind of still trying to figure out exactly what they're ultimately going to be. You disagree with that, and I want to hear why you disagree with that.
Oh I look, for a while I was looking at international Latin, and There is no way I would invite my friends to see an international Latin dance competition. It is so bizarre. I'm like, okay, what has this got to do with Latin dancing?
Mm.
Now, obviously, you go back and you look at Walter Laird, the world professional Latin champion in 1969. That had nothing to do with Latin dancing.
Yeah.
It's just that now everybody can, jump up, twirl around 3 times, go down into the splits while the girl stands there and applauds.
Yeah.
But I just do find it a little bit bizarre. Rhythm dancing, I'm just not sure. I love rhythm dancing because it's, I think you could get a lot of technique into it that if you don't try to do it in the competition, you can still go out and dance.
Yeah.
But Latin dancing, it's like, okay, what's the purpose of this? And once again, I'm talking about these kids who are absolutely brilliant, but it's like, if you're sitting in a bar in South Boston and a Latin dance competition comes on, it's like, okay then, what's on the other channel?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, if we look at kind of the sustainable business model, at least in the US, and you're dealing with pro-am students that are interested in competing, I'm not saying that you can't get the same hip action from a samba in a 70-year-old that you can in a 15-year-old, but it looks dramatically different. So from a pro-am experience too, I feel like there's an argument to say that what we're doing in Latin, as far as the athleticism of it, doesn't necessarily translate well to the social dance experience or to the older pro-am competitor experience.
No, as I say, these guys are athletes.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, when you look at the rhythm division, all right. So once again, having got myself involved with every community in Boston, at one point, salsa became, almost mainstream, and they started running the Boston professional salsa championships. Well, every year, a ballroom couple would win it because when it comes to competitions, they know how to look better.
Yeah.
So yet, if you go into a club and you see a ballroom couple and you'd like, can you get the bouncers to get those 2 idiots out of here right now? But in a competition, it does look better. So like rhythm is like, is it supposed to be that athletic?
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to the idea of, what is reality and what is fantasy? Is the lived experience, is the reality of the industry that we should be striving to find a formula that works at the bar and at the nightclub, or are we wanting to push this competitive aspect? Because at a certain point, those two paths diverge and it becomes less and less connected how you got from competition to social or from social to competitive.
So once again, you go to, well, which direction do you want it to go? Like, the first thing that has to happen is that dancing has to be run by business people. So again, let's go back to soccer in England. Okay, the guy that runs the Premier League makes $7.5 million a year. Most of the people who run dancing do it as a
passion project,
side job, a hobby. You know, and once again, let's be a little bit controversial. In America, Brad McDonald has his critics. However, Brad McDonald gets things done. You may not agree with him, but if he says something's going to happen, something happens. And this guy isn't pulling in $5 million a year, so it's, we need to, things are just going to keep going on the way they're going. Unless money talks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have to find a way to take a mainstream that everybody can make money out of this. And that includes the dancers, because when the golfers do pro-am, they're doing it for charity.
Yeah.
So somebody will pay $1 million to play with Tiger Woods, and Tiger goes, "Give me that." No, you're not getting that check, Tiger. Here, let's go to some charity. Here, world champions are doing it because they have to, because they just, as I say, the sport does not support them. So that's a hell of a, I think we could talk here until 2022 about that last question you basically asked me. There's no answer to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again,
That's a big one.
Yeah. Well, it's a conversation, a constant struggle in my household about where the passion and love of the activity ends and where the ability to make this a financially viable career path begins. And how do you balance the two? How do you find the way to navigate between the two? Can the two interact in a positive way? And what is the pathway to create for not only myself, but for the people behind me? That's why I really wanted to talk to you about, what your perspective on that is and how you kind of see yourself within the industry with SuperShag, because I think it's a tough line to walk. As like, I care about the dance and the enjoyment of the passion of movements, but I also have bills to pay. And how do we find those two interacting with each other? And do you have to sacrifice part of the art, the competitive, the athleticism in order to make it a viable business option?
No, you just have to sacrifice your own life.
Yeah.
So SuperShag is it's an interesting experiment because, 2019, we had 6 teachers who made 6 figures.
Teaching.
That's not bad, working for a studio.
How many hours were they teaching and how many students did they have going to competitions?
Well, we have a lot. So at that point, we had about 130 competitive students. But then, how can I put this? We charge the same for a competition entry as it is for a lesson. So that's what the studio is based on. That if you can afford to have a lesson, then you can afford to come and dance a competition. So you hear these horror things like, hey, look, I had some really, really fantastic pro-am students. So I must admit, there was sometimes, 1 year in Ohio, I had 3 pro-am open winners, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was some guy who just wandered onto the floor, and I'm going, actually, he's made 4 or 5 times more than I have with one student. I might not one. So, I feel that at SuperShag, the teachers do a lot, but because of our price setup, they could end up going with 10 students. Like, even if you look at this virtual stuff, so we've done the last 3 cups we've done, we've been the top studio. It's like, we're not ripping anybody off.
Yeah.
So they can do two competitions for the price of a lesson, or 2 competition entries for the price of a lesson. So it's tough. And obviously, a lot of our teachers have been with us for a long, long time. And there is a point where they have to go and do something else. Sometimes they do it right, the way they leave us. Sometimes they do it wrong. But that's just the way it is. But the teachers are expected to do everything. And it was like I was said about Keith and Didio with Dancesport. They couldn't have afforded to have Dancesport if they hadn't been DJing the competition as well.
Right.
So when we go to a cub, okay, then the teachers are asked to video, they're asked to take photographs. We don't ask them to help run the parties, because that's Tibor and I do that. But we do expect them to do it. And they can, like, the big problem is, I am not that optimistic about Pro-Am getting bigger, because what I've seen in sort of Europe is that it is aimed at the very top end of the market. So I don't see that many people who are teachers who are coming and dancing with 3 or 4 students. Right. They've all got 1 student. And obviously they are making a very good livelihood out of that. But the problem is those students now expect to win. And not everybody can win. So it's a very short-sighted thing. We're not going to talk about politics here, but I always call it the People's Socialist Republic of SuperShag. Because really it doesn't matter what. We have maybe billionaires, and we have people who are secretaries. Not that being a secretary is a bad job, but it's like there's a huge difference. And yet they can all go and dance a competition. But that doesn't happen. That's not the way that it works.
So with all of that said, before we wrap up for today, do you see a viable future for Pro-Am from a competitive end of the world? Or do you think that it's going to have its heyday, and then as prices increase, as travel becomes more tricky, as there are more events, so priorities become a little bit more split, that Pro-Am as a competitive experience is going to start to slow down, and focusing more on in-studio events or in-studio culture will become more of a priority for instructors and dancers?
Well, once again, that's like a double-ended question. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, what competitions actually do. I actually think there's going to be a boom in competitions once they get going again, because there are a lot of people who have not been affected by COVID. The poor dance teachers have, but a lot of our students have not. And those would be the students who would be going to cups anyway. So I think in the short term, we could see a real boom, because you've been cooped up for a year, and you haven't been spending any money. So why not go to a competition? It's like, the unfortunate thing is the teachers take advantage of that, which would be understandable. They start putting up their prices. So everything goes, as I say, about how inclusive can you make it, you know?
Yeah.
So as long as you can, take somebody to a competition and they do 5 entries, like one of the reasons why I sort of didn't like Fred Astaire's was because there was a competition in Boston and I could bring 40 students, but they all had to sign up on a $5,000 package.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, yeah, but I'm going to entertain them. I'm not getting anything out of that $5,000. So why can't we just come with the entries and actually make it a decent competition? No expenses, no nothing. But unfortunately, a lot of the kids come over and maybe they go to a franchise studio and they don't get paid enough. So they really struggle, or they sort of go to an independent studio and they get one student who's willing to fly them first class around the world, do stuff, and then all of a sudden, So it's this really hard balance all the time. How do you make it that not everybody will be able to dance?
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the interesting things for us at SuperShag was that the studio actually, we opened it at the January 2002. The first year that we broke even was 2008. Remember when there was a big crash? There was a huge crash. And what happened was that our private lessons went up and our group classes went down. Because the $10 group classes, that was the sector of the community that really got hurt.
Right.
The sector that was able to afford private lessons, they were okay. They still kept going.
So wait, back up for a second so that I make sure that I'm hearing this properly. So you opened your doors in 2002, you said. The first year that you were profitable was 2008?
Correct.
See, this is the kind of stuff, like maybe not for this podcast, but future episodes. I feel like there is not enough discussed. Maybe it doesn't filter down to the younger generation of dance instructors and dance business people, but I'm listening to that and I'm going, that means that you were investing with a hope and a prayer for 6 years that this business was going to turn a profit for you. And that is just...
Well, basically what happened was I had a small studio.
Yeah.
Which I was teaching out of. And I was just working all the time. So I really wasn't spending any money. And all the money was going into keeping the big studio open. I actually didn't go to the big SuperShag studio that much. So it's just like keep popping it in, pop, 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 pop.
Yeah.
It's I would be really, really wealthy if I'd been able to invest the money that I made teaching by myself. Actually really well off.
Yeah.
But because we're talking the early 2000s, and like I was teaching 60 to 70 lessons every week and running 2 parties. But once again, it was cheaper than basically everywhere else. Like even now, SuperShag is, I think it's probably the cheapest proper studio in Boston.
Yeah.
So, but I always thought I want numbers. I had seen another great thing about Fred Astaire's was that we got to see the numbers that all the studios did. And when some of the studios, one student was 60% of the money that they grossed, it's like, oh.
Yeah. That's a scary place to be in.
That's a really scary place. So it's okay while you're doing it, but then because invariably that student will go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting business to be in.
Very much so. And I feel, yeah, again, I feel like there's not enough communal discussion about the ins and outs and how do you set your pricing? How do you identify your niche in the market? How do you discover, you know, if you're going to prioritize socials or group classes? How much outreach do you do? How much reinvestment in your business do you do? And then from a student perspective, like we're having these discussions. Did your students at the time for those 6 years know that you were just reinvesting and reinvesting and reinvesting and you weren't living this lavish lifestyle that they all imagine that we all live?
No,
Yeah.
they had no idea. But you know, it's just one of those things. Like the real problem is that there is no, like, who can we really go and talk to about business? Who could we go and talk to about a career path? Because all the associations, they're interested in dancing.
Well, I feel like if you will allow it, there might be more conversations to be had at a later date. But I want to be very respectful of your time for tonight. So anything that you want to leave our listeners on, any final words of wisdom for this episode that you want to leave people with?
Yes. A lot of people call me, and now they call our manager to say, okay, why is SuperShag being successful? And all I say is, well, I really would like to treat people the way I want to be treated. And I'll leave you on a little story about we did have, this is a while ago, a lot of different companies would call us and say, we're having a Christmas party or something. Can you come and do a performance? Can you come teach a class? Whatever. So we just had a couple working for us, and I think they were runners up at like USDC Rising Star Latin. That's pretty good. So this company, said, and I quoted them a price, which was not outrageous, okay, but it was low four figures to come and do something. So I said, and they were like, oh, well, I said, how about this? How about I come and bring the world's Pro-Am champion? They were like, sold.
Because they don't know the difference.
I rest my point,
yeah.
my lord.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Nope.
They have no idea. They wanted the world's Pro-Am champion.
Yeah.
Not the guys who were runners-up in the, actually, I think it was the Rising Star in Ohio, which is still a really good,
Yeah. Inside the ballroom industry, those are credentials. Outside of the ballroom industry, no one cares.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for being a guest on today's podcast.
I hope this doesn't get you shut down.
No, I think you're okay. I think it's okay.
Oh, that's all right. Okay.
Thank you once again to Chris for being a guest on today's podcast. If you would like to find out more about SuperShag Dance Studios or any of their upcoming events, you can use the links in the description box below. As always, I'm your host, Samantha with Love.Live.Dance. You can find the podcast versions of these episodes at ballroomchat.com, and you can follow us across social media at ballroomchat. If you've not already done so, please do make sure that you hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know every single time we post a new episode. As always, stay safe, stay positive, and we hope to see you dancing very soon.